Hi guys, Yasmo here, and today I'm going to talk about the development manifesto, about the harvest crafting, and actually way more than that, because I thought of making a video just talking about the harvest crafts, but I feel like I should put this in a bigger context to address some of the issues that PoE is having and talk about the kind of a pattern that I've noticed with GGG's balancing and like there are kind of like two balancing forces. So just if you're here for my quick take, basically I think these changes are pretty bad and they actually hurt the game in a way that actually hurts their like monetary gains and hurts the enjoyment of the game for most players. That's as far as I can see it, and I see a big disconnect between the player base and the actual like gameplay that happens in the game, like realistically, versus the developer's idea of it. But I'm going to talk about that in a moment, because first I would like to address a couple of other things. I'm going to talk about the balancing, I'm going to talk about performance issues, and a couple of other things that are really like being not addressed, I think. And community is basically like polarized between two extremes, and they're not really looking at what are the actual issues, right? Like big part of the vocal at least community, like people on Reddit and so on, are like for it, and they're like completely blowing things out of proportion in one way, and then another group is blowing things out of proportion out of way, and the voices of reason, let's call them, are very hard to notice, because they're just drowned by the people yelling things in extreme way, one or the other. So I wanted to give kind of a more balanced look at this situation. But first I wanted to talk about why I think this is happening, and that has to do with the internal workings of GGG, which I don't personally know. I don't have any like personal behind the scenes insight into it. I just know what I know from the observations, right? So I'm gonna tell you the observation and the impression that I'm having. Basically, there seem to be two big balancing forces at GGG, and I don't know if this has to do with like with individual people or with departments or who's doing it. I'm not gonna be like accusing anyone or anything, because I literally have no idea who does these things in their company. I'm just seeing very like disconnected ideas, right? One idea is basically, if I had to like put it in a generalized way, one idea is like, let's just throw random shit around and let the players pick up the pieces. And the other idea is like actually thinking through the changes and making them actually make sense, right? And that's the one that I'm very much in favor of. Let me give you an example of what I mean, right? Because this might not be very clear and obvious to everyone as it is to me when I notice this. So if you look at the Elementalist, right? The ascendancy changes that happened in this expansion, right? In the ritual and Echoes of the Atlas are amazing. The ascendancy changes are absolutely amazing. I'm in love with so many of them. If you know how Elementals looked like before, it was full of completely horrible, unplayable, like useless mechanics, to the point that people who were playing Witch and Racing were actually not ascending, because it was fucking pointless to even pick up the ascendancy points. That's how bad they were. They were like ascendancy points that gave you like randomly you got more damage, or randomly you got more AoE, and sometimes you shock, and sometimes you ignite, and sometimes you randomly freeze, and it was all so horrible and so bad. And then randomly also golems, by the way. It made absolutely no sense, right? The ascendancy made no sense, was not really playable in any way other than like some gimmicky things, and even that was just like pointless. You'd probably be better off playing another ascendancy. It was basically a case of like someone just having a bunch of ideas, throwing them together, and then being like, well, players will figure something out of that. And then someone came along recently, I think there is like a recent new voice at GGG who actually came along and was like, listen, how about we open up many opportunities for players to be creative, but do it in a way that actually makes sense, right? So if you want to shock, how about you can focus on shock, right? And this opens up so many creative ways of playing, because you can even do physical shock. You can do like physical hits shock if you want, right? You don't have to convert. You can even do like ignites and shocks on your cold damage, right? You can do so many creative things. And then the pendulum of doom and all the like random nodes that existed here that gave you AoE or damage randomly, someone actually put it in this. Like, this is one of the most elegant balanced solutions that I've ever seen in the game. Basically, the way that convergence works is that you have the area of damage while you're not hitting unique monsters, but while you are hitting unique monsters, you gain the extra damage. This is so elegant, such an elegant solution, and does basically the thing that seemingly the previous Ascendancy intended to have, but completely failed at delivering. This is really, really amazing. It allows you to focus on a specific element. It allows you to focus on defense and offense. More Ascendancies have like defensive and offensive options. It's really, really amazing. Another change that I looked at, I was like, there's for sure there's some new person at GGG, or some like new force at GGG doing this, or some new person like actually getting through their thoughts, like the Slayer change, right? The +1 to maximum frenzy charges. I feel every person who is like a build maker, whoever looked at the Slayer tree and looked at this node was like, this seems like it could be a really good node. There is a potential here, right? You can build a character with a lot of frenzy charges, and then you can gain maximum endurance charges for it as well. How can you benefit from both? There's some cool ideas here, right? But it didn't give you more frenzy charges, and the node was super underwhelming, because if you look at +1 to maximum, right, you'll notice that other ascendancies like +1 to frenzy charges, +1 to maximum frenzy and power charges, +1 max power charge, +1 max power charge. This one had also more, +1 endurance charge, +1 endurance charge. It's given like candy to all the ascendancies, right? And this is an underplayed ascendancy, very weak in every other aspect. This is a node that is never being picked, so this made perfect sense to add the +1 to maximum frenzy charges, because you still have to figure out your frenzy generation and so on, but this gives you the +1x to max, because this is the whole reason why you would pick that, even is because you have a lot of frenzy charges, right? So this was another like an obvious balance solution, but I feel like the I don't know how to call, like, let's call them, okay, the chaos and the order, okay? So the side of order of the balance team had this idea, but the side of chaos of the balance team would never like do this thing, right? Like, this makes too much sense. This would be too easy, you know? And meanwhile, this is like an amazing change that someone finally went through, like a super tiny nuanced change, right? Like nobody even, like not many people are playing Slayer still. It's still not an amazing ascendancy, which kind of means that it deserved buffs, right? Such as this one. So there are many changes like this that I'm in love with that happened on the passive skill tree, for example, that definitely show that there is like someone at GGG who really understands the game and knows what makes sense, right? And I love that, and this is probably what's holding the game together in a large way, because someone is really making things that, like, designing things that make sense, that still players have to think around, players can still innovate, they still open up options for creativity, but they're not just like random bullshit thrown in because, you know, like, I don't know if you guys know the Key and Peele sketch with the Gremlins 2 movie, you know, like, oh, you want a electricity gremlin? That's it, in the movie, you know, super random idea. Yes, it's in the movie. It's not only in the movie, but it's in the movie, you know. It's like someone went with like, yo, you want to randomly you get damage or AoE? Okay, it's in the game. You got it, you know. It feels like just completely random ideas being thrown together, and actually on purpose, because somehow someone at GG thinks that that's a good idea to develop the game, right? I completely disagree with that, and the changes to the ascendancies are just a proof of like how good these things are. Like, if you give players agency, if you give players choice, if you give players control, while still keeping the difficulty level, because that's not the only way to keep difficulty, right? You can also keep difficulty in other levels. Like, just look at the number of players that played this league. Look at the retention, okay? Like, the retention of players was massive. Like, there were more players playing and keeping with the game for longer than ever before. Why? Largely because of the harvest being back, but I'm going to talk about that in a second when I address the harvest, because of the ascendancies actually opening up more options. Like, more ascendancies are actually playable, and harvest also enables you to play more ascendancies in many ways. And it also the Atlas changes, which allow you to instead of doing random shit randomly in random places in random maps with no rhyme or reason, you can actually design something. You can actually be like, okay, I'm gonna do this region and pick these nodes, and this is gonna be my strategy. Or I'm gonna pick these nodes like I'm doing right now. For example, like recently when I was playing, I was doing T17 and I was picking T17 like burial chambers and picking these nodes to drop more cluster jewels, and I can like target farm something. It's good for SSF, it's good for Trade League. There is the biggest diversity of strategies there ever was when they gave people more choice. You'd think that it would be different, right? That like, oh, if it's random, then people are just gonna be doing random things. But if you do it deterministically, then people are just gonna all do the same thing. That's the best currency, right? No. Not at all. If you balance things properly, like this expansion actually did, people are gonna be doing tower farming, you know, the T1 or T2, whatever, tower farming. People are gonna be doing dunes farming for the legions, Harby farming, 20% delirium farming with the extra nodes. People are gonna be doing harvest farming. People are doing also like farming missions in the vaults of Atsiri and stuff. Like so many crazy things are happening, so many crazy strategies, so many creative opportunities for people because people have choice and agency and options, right? It's a huge fundamental idea behind why this game is successful, and somehow part of the design team does not get it, and the other part is like, I think, struggling to like convince the chaos side of the balance team that this is actually a good idea, and the chaos side is like, nah, fuck that. So that's one of the ways, right? Another place where I see this is when they balance, for example, boss fights, right? There are certain things that the side of chaos wants to balance in such a, I don't know, toxic and annoying way. I don't know how else to call it. But basically, I'm going to give you an example, okay? This is like an analogy. Basically, imagine you have a ball, right? And the game's objective is to pick up the ball, okay? And you'd think that, okay, let's make the game harder. We want the game to be really hard. All right, okay, we want the game to be, of picking up the ball to be really hard. What can we do? Well, we can make the ball slippery, okay? We can make the ball slippery. Well, that's kind of weird and gross. How about we make the ball heavy? Okay, let's make the ball heavy. That's gonna be hard to pick up. You're gonna have to like work out a little bit, you're gonna have to get stronger, and then you can pick it up, right? You know that you have some kind of a path to doing it, and then you can pick it up, right? But instead, and some fights are balanced that way, right? But instead of that, a fight like, for example, Cyrus is balanced in a way that anytime you go to pick up the ball, someone kicks it from under you, right? You go to pick up the ball again, and someone kicks it away, like randomly. Like, it's so fucking infuriating. It's basically balancing things by making them inconvenient and balancing them by making them annoying. Like, if you balance the game by making it annoying, how much do you think players are gonna enjoy that, right? How much do you think players are gonna enjoy entering the arena and there are storms that you need to wait a few minutes to move away so that you can actually fight the boss? It took them so long. It took them like a year to bring this boss to a state where it's still frustrating and annoying and horrible of mess of a fight, but it was even worse than it was even worse before, right? Like the problem with Cyrus is that instead of fighting the boss and the boss doing like difficult, like having like difficult, I don't know, you need to do a lot of damage or you need to have a lot of mitigation. Like these things are still present. It is still a challenging fight in those aspects. But the worst thing about the fight, and the thing why actually most players are dying, is the fact that you can't really fight him for most of the fight, right? Like the moment he spawns, he teleports away. Like, what is that? Like the first move of a boss very often nowadays is run away. Like like I'm gonna now perform the move. My first move is run away. Like, and you're gonna have to go chase and find where the boss is, and you're kind of limited by the fact that you're super zoomed in because you cannot zoom out your camera more, so you can't even see where the fuck he is if you didn't pay attention for that moment when he was like turning and flame dashing, you know. And in some cases you won't be able to see. The visual clarity in many cases is horrible, and you are just like unable to fight him. He teleports away, you deal some damage to him, and then he like teleports away, flies away, becomes invulnerable, teleports to another place, you go to him, he becomes invulnerable again, he puts you in a maze, you get out of the maze, he becomes invulnerable again, he transforms into ghost, he flies away. Like you can never fight him. It's like infuriating, super frustrating and annoying. Just balancing the encounter by making it annoying, as opposed to another encounter which there are some issues with it, but the Maven fight, for example, is much healthier. The Maven fight is something that requires you to think, right? It requires you to, okay, you have to use your memory. There is the memory game. It's kind of weird, but it's okay. Like it's some kind of a skill, some kind of a difficulty added to it, right? The only problem that I have with the memory game is the visual clarity is horrible. The contrast is horrible. Like some people need to really get a slap on the wrist for like how visually unclear things are in this game. Like at the beginning of the league, you couldn't even tell which passives you picked because it was so unclear. They had to increase contrast on this, and you couldn't tell if you have the Maven thing. I don't know, they need better monitors, I think, or something, like just to be able to see how players actually see this, you know? Like you couldn't tell if these missions are selected or if this is selected at the beginning of the league, and they had to correct that because visual clarity is a massive issue in this game. So one side of the development team wants to balance things by making them annoying, and one side wants to balance things by making them difficult and like giving bosses more health, more abilities, more projectiles, more damage, like interesting mechanics, you know? That's really cool. Like it would be cool if you had to like hit the monster from certain direction or hit something else to hit, you know, like just mechanics, adding mechanics, and they did that, and that's really cool. And I find Maven fight to be way more interesting and way less frustrating to for example, to the Cyrus fight, right? It's way better. The Cyrus fight is just a horrible mess. Like I would much rather do like Uber Elder or any other fight, right? A good example of a fight that has good mechanics is like Uber Atziri, right? Uber Atziri has mechanics that require, for example, preparation, which means you have to deal with the reflect, because she has like a reflect on her. You have to deal with the mechanics, you have to dodge out of different things, right? Very straightforward boss, but like well designed and still difficult and challenging. Still can be difficult and challenging, still can one-shot players who are not dodging things in time or don't have overpowering amounts of damage. But it's not like annoying to fight it, it's not like annoying hassle and chore that you have to do. It's just a difficult fight just as a base, right? So another issue that I want to talk about very briefly before I move on to the harvest is the performance, because I feel like there is some force at GGG that is extremely stubborn, that refuses to do things that make sense. Because all of the things that I mentioned right now is basically something that is random or annoying or just shot in the dark versus something that makes sense and is actually well thought out. Because there are plenty of things in this game that are well thought out and well executed, right? But another thing that I really disagree with, and the direction I would love to hear some of the developers' thoughts on that, is the reason why they're not implementing solutions that people suggest constantly that I don't think they have addressed really clearly, or at least I haven't seen. If they have, please someone link it in the comments below. I would love to see that. Solutions for the performance. So there is a huge issue of, for example, if you want to farm 100% delirious maps in this region and doing the harbingers, many players with decent computers who are otherwise capable of playing, you know, modern games on high settings are crashing in these maps. The game is literally unable to keep up with what's going on in the content that is basically gated behind having certain graphics cards or certain processing power on your computer, and not just like the base requirements, not even the recommended requirements. You have to have like way above that to do certain content, and even including for like even accounting for the fact that you are gonna be using things like going to graphics settings and you're gonna go either on Vulkan or DirectX. I was doing both, like I tried both. Like you're gonna make sure that you like disable your VSync, you're gonna make sure that you enable the dynamic resolution or dynamic culling, lower all the settings to as low as you can. But here are a few solutions that I would love for them. Like let me give you 3 from the top of my head that would improve performance, okay? Number 1, turn off rain, okay? ability to turn off rain. Number one, huge FPS gain for so many players. Okay. Number two, turn off shadows, not lower them, turn off shadows. Okay. You claim, you can claim all you want that this doesn't affect performance, right? But we know it does when fucking so many items are being rendered on the ground, flying out of the monsters with animations, with shadows as well, okay? This affects performance in a huge way, and when the game allowed for turning off shadows in the past, it was actually a big improvement to FPS on lower end machines, right? Third thing is items, right? When you kill monsters, let me go into some area, okay? Let me go to like just a random area in Blood Aqueducts or whatever, okay? And you're gonna notice that there are items that are flying out of the monsters that nobody cares about, right? And nobody will ever look at. But my point is that if you look at these items, okay, that appear here, the thing is, you can see them being animated here, right? You can see items. If I go, let me pick something up, let me pick this thing, okay? Let me pick up this sword, okay? If this sword drops out of a monster, okay? If it drops out of a monster, you can see it flies here. Let me turn off the aura effect so you can see it better. Okay. Let me pick up this item. You see it on the ground here. Okay. I throw it on the ground. It flies. It has an animation. It's a 3D model that has like shadows and is rendered and has all kinds of graphic shit applied to it, right? Nobody cares about seeing this. Nobody wants to see this. Everybody wants to see this, okay? Everybody only cares about the text. So you could make an option in the game, make it an advanced option, make it go here, click on advanced settings, only do these if you're an advanced user, do not touch them if you're a noob, give people a warning because, oh, what if they ruin their experience, okay? And if someone is using a loot filter, they will never, ever, ever look at items flying. And if you're doing like 100% Juice Delirium's items, there are thousands of these. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these being animated all the time as you're killing monsters. It's insane. It's so pointless. This is not needed in the game in any way, shape, or form. Like, I'm gonna skip over thousands and thousands of items and only see every now and then when I see, oh, that's the thing I want to click, right? Am I looking at that little orb? Like, am I looking at that orb that's flying here? You can see this little gem that's flying when I'm throwing it, this green thing, animated, it bounces off of the ground. Why do I have to have this instead of a performance increase, right? Instead of being able to actually do all of the content in the game, right? Like, many of the players, I would guess probably majority of the players, if I had to guess, majority of the players who play the game, obviously only like 1% of the players who play the game would be able to even do T16 like 100% delirious maps, right? But if all of them somehow got there, like majority of them probably would not have systems that can handle that, even though they can play the game just fine in any other circumstance, right? So this is a solution for the, like, because they're trying to do like, oh, maybe if we make less items drops, well, how about you let us disable these animations, let us disable the shadows so that none of this happens and we just see the thing that we actually only see. Nobody ever notices these items droppings. We only see these things. We only see what loot filter shows. And I'm speaking for not the player who just installed the game, I'm speaking for people who are advanced enough to use loot filters and understand them, right? So make an option for people who are gonna be running this advanced content to disable that. This would be such a massive change. I would love to see a reason why these changes are not possible to implement, because if you think that this would make the game look worse, just let me show you a footage of how the game looks like when you're actually doing these maps, right? Does that look appealing to you? Does that look like a game that looks beautiful? Okay, do you think it would really look worse if it looked basically like this, but also you had like more FPS? Obviously, if you had more FPS, if there was less shit around flying, like all the effects and stuff was actually reduced and the graphical quality, it would actually look better. It would look simpler and it would look better and it would look cleaner and it would be actually playable for players instead of not letting people actually play the game because you're I don't know, someone is being stubborn about not wanting to implement these changes, because they would really help the game. I'm pretty sure they would improve the game in a large way. So let's finally move to Harvest, okay? This is the reason why I made the video in the first place. There is, again, I wanted to talk about this, like the two balance forces in GGG, because I wanted to make a distinction. I wanted the people who are at GGG, who are in the forces of order, I wanted them to feel good. I wanted the forces of order to not feel like I'm talking back, like talking badly about them, because I really appreciate the forces of order at GGG. I really love their design ideas, and I really love the complexity and how the game works with all their design ideas. However, I wanted to address whoever it is that are the forces of chaos at GGG, okay? You are disconnected from how the game works and from how people are playing it. And this has been demonstrated numerous ways, but by numerous people talking about this issue, right? There is a thing here about like, for example, this, right? The first part of this that concerned us is that Harvest was critical in making the best items and hence made many other game systems obsolete. Okay, which game systems were made obsolete? I'm not aware really of many of those. The second part was that it's inconvenient to trade them, becomes less of a problem if we solve the first issue. See, not at all. It doesn't become less of a problem. It's still just as big of a problem. It's just that less players are gonna have to deal with it, but it's still just as big of a problem. Our problem with all this can be summarized in the following thought. Why would I use regular Exalted Divine Annul Orb when I can get a one through Harvest that has deterministic result? Because there are still reasons to do so. There are still plenty of reasons to do so. There are, when you're crafting magic items, when you're, for example, alt spamming something, right? You're trying to roll for, let's say like a power charge, +1 power charge helmet, or you're trying to roll a cluster jewel, right? Many times, let's say cluster jewel, okay? I'm trying to make cluster jewels for my minions, and I'm gonna roll something, and I wanna roll like life with something else, right? If I roll a magic item, and it has one of the good mods that I want, that is not too hard to roll, but another mod that cannot be removed by Harvest because it's like mana or stats or some kind of other, there are plenty of modifiers that cannot be affected by Harvest, then I annul it, right? I use annuls regularly this league. I use annuls regularly. I use Exalted Orbs regularly. I use Divines regularly. I use all of these currencies very regularly. The Harvest did not make these things obsolete. They're still usable if you think that you don't play the game. If you think that you are actually not playing the game and you don't understand how to craft. Like straight up, someone who says that does not understand how the game works in a basic way. Has never like crafted items. Like seriously, this is really ridiculous how disconnected this is from the game. And also like there are things about how everybody has powerful items, right? No, not everybody has powerful items. Only the top like few % of players will have the most powerful items. Sure, it's more than before with Harvest, right? But you know who the Harvest actually helps? Harvest helps someone who wants to play Burning Arrow Inquisitor, okay? I want to play a Burning Arrow Inquisitor, and I can't really buy gear because people who, let's say, craft with fossils and they want to craft and they like randomly are going to have other like rares that are going to have like damage on them, they will not have the combination of items that I want on my build. So I can make sure that I roll that, but I will have to like fix resist, because otherwise I can't even cap my resist if I get all of the damage that I want on my gear. So I can do the resist by doing the Harvest, right? And it will still cost me, it will still be an expensive items. I will still have to spend like, I don't know, like let's say 10 eggs or 20 eggs if I want a good item, but I will be able to get it and I will be able to play the build. And I'm like a regular player. I'm not casual because I play, let's say, like 4 hours a day, let's say. So I'm not casual, but I'm also not like a hardcore player that plays the game non-stop. I take days off and so on, but I can play a fun build, and I can actually like kill Cyrus, okay? I can like kill Cyrus 8, wow, and now I feel accomplished. And now maybe I can make another build like that. And then guess what? Your retention goes up. People have goals, people make cool items, people play more builds because more builds are viable with Harvest. Now what you're doing by making this change, by making, let's summarize the changes basically, right? You get less harvest crafts, okay? Less harvest crafts. The tier 3, higher tier, I don't know if this means only 4 or 3, but it's still lower. So you get less crafts overall. You cannot craft specific, like if you made an influenced item, right? Imagine you made an influenced item because you want to have like chaos damage over time multiplier on gloves, okay? What a luxury. You want to have chaos damage over time multi on gloves. Now you cannot augment a res on this. You cannot augment life on this. You cannot do any of those things because the item is influenced, right? So God forbid you're gonna have a usable item that has an influenced mod, which are basically essential for majority of the builds that are not meta. 60% increased chance to encounter Heart of the Grove. That maybe basically compensates for this, but I still don't think so. You're still gonna have less crafts overall, right? Heart of the Grove encounter, nobody cares because it doesn't drop anything, so nobody gives a shit. So, and also the annul mods, right? The annul mods that are targetable are basically removed, right? And also specific divines. Specific divines are such a non-issue. This is so dumb. Like who specific divines are like, oh, I got like, this is where it's useful, right? You got a resistance, right? And you got like tier 3 res. But if it was max roll, maybe you could use that item. Maybe you could actually use that item. So you look for it, you either farm it if you're SSF, or you buy it for like 20 or 30 C. Wow, you spent like 30 C or 20 C or however many chaos, right? And you got like 3 fire resistance more. Wow. Mirror tier item suddenly. Like what the why would you remove that? Like allowing you to tweak your items a little bit so that you can maybe like try to match your wise oak resist or something, or try to get a little bit rest just so that you're capped so that you can actually play the game. Like I'm hitting myself in the head if you can't hear. Basically, I have no words on how bad that is, because here's the thing. If your argument is that the game is too easy, right? Here's the thing. For the 1% of players who can get any gear they want, who are gonna have Headhunter in the first week of the league like I did and many other players, right? This makes no difference. I'm still gonna have as much currency as I want. I'm still gonna play whatever fun builds I wanna play. Doesn't matter. Like I'm gonna still do that. But the 90+% players, the vast majority, like almost all players, who would like to aspire to reach that content but are struggling and they can't do it if they focus and they grind and they use the crafts properly and they learn how to do it and they improve, they can actually do it. They have a goal, they can actually do it, right? Now it's gonna be like more out of reach for more people than before, right? So you're actually making people quit the game earlier. You're making people who want to play fun builds quit the game earlier because now much less builds are going to be viable. So you're making people quit the game earlier who are like good at the game and like build makers. You're making people quit the game who are bad at the game and just need some extra help to like fix their resist because they can't even know how to do that in other ways, right? So you're actually making people play the game less. You're removing goals from people. There are crafts like people going for like crazy helmets or crazy amulets or crazy gloves or weapons or chest pieces that will cost them hundreds of exalts, right? And they make like that craft and they spend like 300x. Someone spent like 300x on a chest, okay? And they post it on Reddit and they show how they crafted that, right? And they say, okay, I spent like 300x on that. First spent like 150x on rerolling that stat over and over, right? And then now Harvest basically makes it so that this will not be achievable in the league, right? This will not be something that someone can make. But how many people do you think made that item? Like three people in the league? Like out of thousands, out of like, I don't know how many 100,000 people played this league. Like you can have like 20 people that will have this specific like mirror tier item. Like who are you even nerfing? Who are you even targeting with these nerfs? Because this makes no sense, right? We don't want to take away the feeling of closing your eyes and exalting an item, scared to see whether you ruined it or not. It's they both overestimate and underestimate the players at the same time. And it's interesting that I feel like whoever, like, there are different people responsible for making these changes and announcing them or something, because they knew not to announce this right before the announcement for the new league, because obviously someone knew that a lot of players are going to be unhappy with this, but at the same time they think that this is the right change. Like, so are you saying that you want players to be unhappy? You want players to think that the game is worse now? Is that what you're saying, that you're making this change consciously, knowing that the majority of the players is gonna think that this is horrible for the game? Like, you're literally, like, you're removing goals from players who are advanced. You're removing like goals and ability to achieve things for players who are less advanced. You're literally making people play the game less. You're basically gonna make less money because you're making this change. You straight up are gonna make less money. Like, please show statistics. How many people kill Awakener level 9, or how many people killed the Feared, or how many people killed Maven this league, okay? Show me how many people killed Maven, the Feared, and Awakener 9 this league. I wanna see that. I wanna see that number being like 40% of the players killed it. Wow, the game is too easy now. No, it's gonna be like less than 1% of the players. It's gonna be less than 1% of the players that actually killed all of those things out of all people that played the game. And so who is this change intended for? Because the 99% of the players, they do not find the game too easy, and the 1% of the players, it doesn't really make that big of a difference for them. Even though it sounds like it does make a difference, because it makes the game less fun. That's the difference that it makes. I'll still be able to do all the things, but it's gonna be less fun, basically. That's what they're basically making the game less fun. You cannot go for like super meme builds and make them actually playable. I'm not talking about making them like, wow, it's gonna clear all content with ease. I'm talking about existent. I'm talking about usable. I'm talking about like you can actually clear maps and try to kill Cyrus, and if you're good at the game, maybe you will succeed, right? Like that's the thing that is most attractive about this game, like making builds, trying to find out if you can kill this thing with this build, right? Trying to find out if you can do it SSF, right? Because in SSF, if you're gonna have less of these crafts now, you're gonna have even harder time doing anything, right? Like SSF is thriving right now, and many people are just enjoying SSF way more because they can actually fix their gear and get like an actual good item. Like if they play the whole league, they play like 2 months, they can get like an actual well-geared character that would be something that they would be able to accomplish on standard in like a few weeks, like less than that, but they're still able to do this, right? So overall, I think these changes are really, really bad, and I hope the forces of order are gonna prevail and speak reason to the forces of chaos, and we're gonna win this battle, and they're gonna actually keep the game fun, right? Because this is essentially like fun detected, fun removed, right? And there was people who posted this. Someone posted, I think, a comment on the forums, and like fun detected, fun removed, or something like that, and they got removed, right? The comment got removed for being too toxic or something. I think that's the truth. I think that's basically what's going on here. I don't think that that's their intention. I think that the people who made a decision for this change just don't really understand the reality of the game and how the game is played by majority of players and what players find fun. They really like this is enough. This is just enough to basically realize that the people making this change do not understand what do people find fun and how they play the game. And I'm talking about like the majority of the players, right? That's it. That's what I'm gonna end in. Basically, that's it. Thank you for listening to the rant. Hopefully this made sense for you. If there are any things that if there's anything that I spoke about that GGG already replied to, that you have some links that you can provide to that I can check out, I would be glad to check it out. But that's it. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.